Good morning, and thank you for joining us for our program today. We hope that you're having a good Lord's Day and a blessed weekend, and we invite you to worship with us today at the Pyburn Street Church of Christ. We will come together this morning at 9 o'clock for Bible study, and we will have classes available for all ages. Following Bible study at 9:50, we will engage in a period of worship to our God. We also will come together this evening at 6 o'clock, and on our Sunday evenings we are currently engaged in a study of angels and demons. And we encourage you to come and bring your Bible and join us in that study at 6 o'clock. We also gather on Wednesday evenings at 7 for Bible study. Please know that you're always welcome at the Pyburn Street Church of Christ. In a number of ways, Jesus emphasized a basic understanding of discipleship which must be accepted by any man or woman who chooses to be Jesus' disciple. The first focuses on our relationship with Jesus. A disciple must understand that Jesus is superior to man. Jesus declared this fact to the 12 in Matthew chapter 10, beginning in verse 24, where he says, "The disciple is not above his master, nor the servant above his Lord. It is enough for the disciple that he be as his master, and the servant as his Lord. If they have called the master of the house Beelzebub, how much more shall they call them of his household? Fear them not, therefore, for there is nothing covered that shall not be revealed, and hid that shall not be known. What I tell you in darkness, that speak ye in light, and what ye hear in the ear, that preach ye upon the housetops. And fear not them which kill the body, but are not able to kill the soul, but rather fear him which is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a farthing? And one of them shall not fall on the ground without your Father. But the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Fear ye not, therefore, ye are of more value than many sparrows. Whosoever therefore shall confess me before men, him will I confess also before my Father which is in heaven. But whosoever shall deny me before men, him will I also deny before my Father which is in heaven." The context is set by the limited commission when Jesus sent the 12 in pairs out to Israelite towns and villages where they were to teach only Israelites. Prior to sending them out, Jesus gave them power to cast out demons and the power over all forms of sickness. Well, 2 things could have easily made these men arrogant. First, they were the 12 apostles, hand-picked by Jesus. That selection was so unique. Most Christians and many non-Christians today instantly know to whom you refer if you say the 12. This is almost 2,000 years after that selection was made. Second, Jesus gave them extraordinary power. They were able to do the impossible, to cast out unclean spirits and to heal all forms of sickness. They easily could say, well, look at what we can do. We are special people. Only we and Jesus can do this. Oftentimes, people with extraordinary abilities and gifts anticipate extraordinary respect. And while these disciples shared some of Jesus' power, they also shared some of Jesus' reception. Rather than emphasizing how special they were, Jesus told them to be prepared to receive the same treatment that he received. Now, Jesus' explanation is insightful. He reminded the 12 that disciples were not above their teacher and slaves were not above their master. Do not nurture an attitude of superiority because of who you are and what you can do. The greatest a disciple can hope for is to be regarded on the same level as his teacher. The greatest a slave can hope for is to be regarded on the same level as his master. Paraphrasing Jesus, he said, "Before your heads swell with thoughts of your importance, look closely at me. I am your teacher. I am your master. Look at the treatment that I receive and anticipate the same treatment." Jesus warned them that if he had enemies who called him the prince of demons, then his enemies would become their enemies as well. If they considered Jesus demonic, they easily would call these disciples demons as well. Rather than be impressed with who the disciples were and what they could do, their enemies would declare the good they did to be simply an expression of evil. But Jesus then reminded them not to allow fear of physical hurt to intimidate them. As disciples of Christ, fear is not to determine our actions. While it may seem that our enemies can harm us and hide their evil actions, that is merely an appearance. It's not a reality. Nothing they do will remain secret. Jesus told the 12 that even if their enemies secretly kill them, their deaths would not remain a mystery. God knows everything that happens, and fear must not determine what we do. God must determine what we do. Jesus says that if we do this, He will acknowledge us as friends before God. The foundation to our understanding of discipleship is that Jesus' disciples can anticipate the same type of rejection that Jesus endured. Evil does not respect godliness. Evil hates godliness. Societies dedicated to ungodliness cannot value people whose faith in God forbids such lifestyles. If Jesus was rejected by His enemies, then today's disciples also can expect to be rejected by forces and influences that oppose Jesus' values. Jesus emphasized His relationship to those who dared to be His disciples once as He spoke to a large group of Jewish people in Matthew chapter 12, beginning in verse 46. His immediate family, His mother and His half-brothers, they arrived and they wanted to speak to Him privately. Jesus was told of their presence, but responded in quite a shocking way. His question, "Who is my family?" Well, He gestured toward His disciples and answered His own question. He said, "When you look at my disciples, you see my family. My family is composed of those who do my Father's will." Friends, Jesus was absolutely devoted to those who were His disciples. He expected those as well who were His disciples to be absolutely devoted to Him. And while His statement is shocking to us now, it was more shocking then. Family members provided other family members the only source of care and support. While it is permissible and even acceptable for a person to do their own thing and live their own life as they choose today, that was not permissible and acceptable for most in Jesus' time. The fact that Jesus' devotion to His disciples was superior to His devotion to His family was a peculiar concept. And that does not suggest that Jesus neglected His family, as evidenced by His asking John to care for his mother in John 19 verses 26 and 27. In this world, the greatest sacrifice any person can make for another is to die for them. The last night of Jesus' earthly life, Jesus made this statement to the 12 in John 15 and verse 13. "Greater love has no one than this, that one lay down his life for his friends." The commitment that Jesus gave was greater than the commitment that Jesus expected in return. All that He asked of His disciples was that they aspire to His level of commitment. Well, uncommitted people cannot be the disciples of a committed teacher. The teacher's commitment is the standard for his disciples' commitment. The second condition of discipleship focuses upon Jesus' disciples' relationship with each other. Disciples who follow Jesus establish and maintain positive relationships with other disciples. The relationships maintained among Jesus' disciples differ from typical relationships among people who are not Jesus' disciples. These differences are to be obvious in their interactions. It is common for Jesus' disciples to struggle to understand and accept these new and different attitudes toward others who are disciples. To focus on the nature of these relationships between disciples, I want you to notice the emphasis in Matthew 20 verses 25 through 28. "But Jesus called them unto Him, and said, Ye know that the princes of the Gentiles exercise dominion over them, and they that are great exercise authority upon them. But it shall not be so among you. But whosoever will be great among you, let him be your minister. And whosoever will be chief among you, let him be your servant. Even as the Son of Man came not to be ministered unto, but to minister, and to give his life a ransom for many. The context increases the significance of the emphasis. James and John's mother personally asked Jesus to place those two sons in the two most significant positions in what she perceived would be his new administration. In their thinking, Jesus would go to Jerusalem, become king, and the 12 would become, so to speak, his staff. And though Jesus told them that he was going to Jerusalem to die by execution, Jesus' statement did not fit their expectations. This woman's request was a major irritation to the other apostles. Each of them wanted what she requested for her sons. But notice the emphasis in Jesus' statement. Remember, they're upset with James and John for their mother's request, and relationships among them were strained. First, the Roman government, as well as all other earthly governments, are led by people of authority who have been given the power to govern. Second, we see that God's government does not work in that way. In God's kingdom, the focus is not on power or control. Thirdly, the focus of this world's kingdoms is control, and the focus of God's kingdom is service. If it is your goal to achieve greatness in God's kingdom, then commit yourself to serving others. In God's kingdom, greatness is achieved by being a servant to others, not by being the master of others. And then number 4, though Jesus occupies the highest position in God's kingdom as its Lord, he came to serve and to be the ransom for many. The 12 were to be each other's brothers. They were to dedicate themselves to serving rather than controlling. And God appreciates and values true humility, but he is unimpressed with posturing or positions. In Luke 22, beginning in verse 24, it says, And there was also a strife among them, which of them should be accounted the greatest. And he said unto them, The kings of the Gentiles exercise lordship over them, and they that exercise authority upon them are called benefactors. But ye shall not be so. But he that is greatest among you, let him be as the younger, and he that is chief as he that doth serve. For whether is greater, he that sitteth at meat, or he that serveth? Is not he that sitteth at meat? But I am among you as he that serveth. Ye are they which have continued with me in my temptations, and I appoint you as a kingdom, as my Father hath appointed unto me, that ye may eat and drink at my table in my kingdom, and sit on thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel. Luke records after Jesus took the Lord's Supper with them, the 12 began to argue among themselves about who of them was the greatest. And Jesus said to them, first, this world's kingdoms determine importance by position, but God's kingdom does not, and neither should they. And secondly, in God's kingdom, there is a complete role reversal. God gave Jesus the kingdom, and Jesus gave the 12 authority in the kingdom, yet Jesus served them. Jesus embodied a new form of leadership. Though the kingdom was his, though he was the Lord in and over that kingdom, service to others was the foundation of his position as Lord. And as Lord, he continued to serve. In John 13, verses 1 through 17, John stressed another occurrence after the supper. None of the 12 condescended to wash feet when they arrived. This was a very lowly, dirty task. Kneeling before someone to wash his dirty feet screams of inferiority. Yet Jesus got up, took off his outer clothing that could get wet. He tied a towel around his waist, put water in a basin, and he washed and dried their feet. Well, Jesus' act mortified Peter to the point of refusing Jesus' act. How inappropriate that his Lord would wash his feet. Then Jesus made his point in an unforgettable manner. He says, "Do you realize what I did? You properly call me teacher and Lord. If as teacher and Lord I can humble myself to wash your feet, surely you can humble yourselves to wash each other's feet. Never forget, you are not more important than I am. It is not enough to know the importance of humility. The blessings of humility come through acts of humility. Friends, are you ready to be a disciple of Christ? Do you recognize the superiority of Christ and the need to submit to Him? Do you see the love and devotion to brotherhood that should exist among fellow Christians? If so, then we encourage you to obey the gospel of Jesus Christ. Friends, we thank you for joining us today, and have a blessed day.